Hello, everyone. Welcome to this new appointment of the 4U40 lecture series on combustion. It is my great pleasure to introduce today Professor Federica Ferraro. She's a junior professor for alternative aviation propulsion systems at Technische Universität Braunschweig, the Institute of Jet Propulsion and Turbomachinery. The research interests of Federica are in numerical modeling and simulation of turbulent multi-phase reacting flows. More recently, she's particularly interested in combustion of sustainable energy carriers, such as hydrogen, ammonia, and synthetic fuels. That will be important, as you know, in future climate neutral, efficient technologies for energy and transportation. She obtained her degree in aerospace engineering from University of Roma La Sapienza, and then she got her PhD from Universität the Bundeswehr München in 2017. After the PhD, she was a postdoctoral researcher at the German Aerospace Center, DLR, in Cologne from 2016 to 2019, and then she joined the reactive thermofluid systems, the Institute for Simulation of Reactive Thermofluid Systems at Darmstadt University, at the Technische University of Darmstadt. She was there until 2023, and since 2021 was a group leader in that group. Federica, thank you again for having accepted our invitation. Today you will talk about net zero carbon and soot and the role of sustainable fuels in reducing emissions. I give you the floor. Thank you very much again.
So thank you very much, Alessandro, and also good afternoon, everyone. I'm very glad to have this opportunity today to present some results and also give my perspective on the role of sustainable fuel in reducing emission, and in particular soot emission, and also would like to thank the Belgian section of the Combustion Institute for this invitation. So as Alessandro said, I have prepared a bit of introduction of myself. Alessandro already kind of introduced me. I have been a postdoctoral researcher at the Technische Universität of Darmstadt for 4 years, and the last 2 years, between 2021 and 2023, I was group leader of the group multidimensional simulation of chemical reacting flows, where most of the results that I'm presenting today have been also performed. Since my last year, I've been appointed junior professor for alternative aviation propulsion system at the Technische Universität in Braunschweig, and I'm part of the Institute of Jet Propulsion and Turbomachinery. In the last 2 years, I've also been program leader for the International Soot in Flame ISF workshop in the session of the turbulent flames. And as you will see during this presentation, it is quite relevant for the research we are doing here. And this workshop is basically on a group of people, a researcher and industrial researcher that meet together in order to improve the understanding of soot formation for different types of fuels. Okay, so with that, this is I will conclude my introduction and start to discuss about some science. So this is the contents of my presentation. I will first motivate this talk. In particular, I will explain why we still need, with sustainable fuel, to discuss about soot and why we need research on soot formation. I will then talk about the numerical modeling of soot formation and the validation we have performed. We'll then move discussing an example of sustainable fuel, and then focus the perspective part on on how we can achieve carbon neutrality in aviation, and conclude with some perspective and research gaps that needs to be filled. Okay, so the first question I would like to answer today is why we should still care about soot even with sustainable fuel. As we in the combustion research community, we know we basically our overarching goal is to try to improve our current technology and as a society to reduce the increase of temperature and the global warming below the level of 1.5 degrees Celsius until 2050. And what you can see here in this figure is basically the temperature anomaly measured by NASA in 2023, in July of 2023, where a significant record of the increase of temperature on the Earth has been measured. So you can see here that is the representation of the difference between the measured temperature minus the average temperature that has been measured between 1951 and 1980. You can basically see that the temperature increase is basically distributed around the entire globe, not only in the most industrialized area of the Earth. And you can also see that basically a significant increase of temperature is also present in the Antarctic, which means that we are also significantly contribute to the polarized melting. Another interesting statistic or interesting data that have been published the same year from NASA is the evolution of the temperature anomaly from 1880 in the last centuries, from the 1880 until today. And what you can basically see is that the increase of temperature, the increase of the temperature anomaly has been continuously rising after the Second World War, in the when globalization and industrialization became extremely important, and in the last decades is always increasing, achieving every year's new records. So from atmospheric research, for atmospheric science, it's basically clear that this temperature increase is basically due to all the anthropogenic emission related to the human activities. So we are talking about industrialization, but also transportation. And this is basically due to the different type of emission which are produced by most of the human activity which rely on hydrocarbons fuel. So you can see here a list of the emissions that are produced during combustion of hydrocarbons. We have the CO2, so carbon dioxide, which is the most famous emission, but we have a series of other greenhouse gas emissions like carbon monoxide and also nitrogen oxide, which have also a significant impact on climate change, so and the temperature increase. We have unburned hydrocarbons, and then soot particles, which is the topic of today. In focusing our attention on the formation of soot particle, you can basically see in this graphical abstract from the paper of Bond and co-author, where they basically gave a great overview on the effect of black carbon or soot particle that interact with the atmosphere. And you can see in this abstract that all human activity, you see here passenger cars, heavy-duty trucks, off-road vehicles, industry, also residential cooking and heating, and also wildfire, and you see here also aviation. They contribute to the emission of particulate matter in the atmosphere, and depending also from the altitude where these particles are emitted, they can interact with the atmosphere and produce different type of effects that we are not going to discuss in detail today. I just put a quote here on this slide to that I think that summarize very well the problem we are facing. So the black carbon is the second most important human emission in terms of climate forcing, and is second only to carbon dioxide. So basically, this is the scenario in which we are moving, and when we move from the current hydrocarbons fuel to some sustainable fuel, we should take care of not only about CO2 emission, but also see how this new type of fuel that we would like to introduce affect the different type of emission and soot particles. In order to understand in which sector we are, which kind of sector are affected by this, I would like to discuss a little bit the one latest results, or some latest data published this year from the IRENA, so the International Renewable Energy Agency, on hard to abate sectors. So here you see the total, so the distribution of the CO2 emission measured in 2022 by different sectors. And you can basically see in colored, so that 1/5 of the CO2 emissions being produced by so-called hard to abate sectors. These are listed here by different colors. So there's heavy-duty trucks, shipping, aviation, and then industries, hard to abate industry like iron and steel industry, and also chemical industry. So this hard to abate sector, obviously, in different way, are defined like that because the electrification of the transition towards zero carbon emission is quite challenging because of the specific peculiarity of the process involved in the energy transformation, and also because even if there is a lot of research in these sectors in order to decarbonize them, the technology, the maturity level of the technologies, of the zero carbon technology is still quite low. So in this report, you see that they basically try to give some advice to the politician, to the people developing policy, in which direction they have to support the transition, and which are the most important aspects related to this hard-to-abate sector. So from this sector, basically, for this sector, it is not possible to think that in 2050 everything will be completely decarbonized at a level of maturity technology like it is today. So in this talk, we are going to discuss some of them, and in particular the sector related, the transition related to the hard-to-abate transportation sector, where in the short term and medium term, we can think that liquid drop-in sustainable fuel will be of major importance to reduce the carbon emission. Okay, so we are basically talking then about carbon neutral fuels that can be produced or generated using power to liquid concept, which means that we are basically using renewable energies for the production and also carbon capturing from the atmosphere, or we are taking the carbon from waste or biomasses. This type of fuel can fit in the current infrastructure. So this means that can be directly used in the current engine or in the current burners, and or they can be used with a minor retrofitting. Then, due to the different type of chemical structure of this fuel, we can reduce the carbon emission, and in some case we can even achieve a sub-zero, so a negative carbon emission. So meaning that we are taking from the atmosphere more carbon than what is released after the combustion. Here I would like to highlight some of the aspects. So this type of fuel have a low environmental impact due to the closed carbon cycle, but they can still produce non-CO2 emissions, including soot. So we are talking about synthetic or bio-derived hydrocarbons that in general have a lower sooting tendency due to the fact that contains a low level of aromatic compared to the fossil fuel hydrocarbons. There is another aspect which is important, is that we cannot generalize the type of emissions from the different sustainable fuel, because they have different feeds. So the composition of this sustainable fuel is not fixed. And just to understand a little bit better, this means that a sustainable fuel which is produced in Europe may not have the same, even if it's the same density, same type of viscosity, may have a different composition than some sustainable fuel which is produced in America or in Asia. And therefore, we need to understand how this sustainable fuel work, or how they perform in the different type of engine that we have to decarbonize. Okay, so with that, I would like to move to the second part and discuss something about how we can model soot, so in the model that we have used in our group in the last years. So first of all, when we deal with soot formation, we are talking about a complex multi-phase problems, which means that if you consider that, for example, in an aero engine, we inject fuel in liquid form, we are talking about at least a 2- or 3-phase three-phase problem. We inject fuel in liquid form, then the fuel evaporates, became gaseous, so where we have combustion, and after that we may have the formation of soot particle. So when we want to model this in a numerical with numerical simulation, we need to have a model which accounts for the entire chain. So we need to have a gas phase mechanism which is able to in detail to characterize the formation of the soot precursor, which are the large polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbon. And then also we need a model which is able to consider the formation of soot particles and the transfer of mass between the gas phase and solid phase. When the particles are formed, these particles interact with the gas phase, with the underlying gas phase, and also there is an interaction between particles. Also, this effect needs to be considered in our model in order to be able to track or the evolution of soot particles and eventually the oxidation of soot particles in a proper form. Obviously, the coupling between the gas phase and the soot phase needs also to be considered to account for the mass transfer from the gas phase to solid phase. After that, the model is conceived, what we need to do is to validate the model, and normally this is done from simple to complex, meaning that we are going to start with laminar and simple lab scale flame. Then we are going to move to turbulent case, still at lab scale, and also at atmospheric pressure. Then we're going to move to model something more complex. For example, as you can see here, a lab scale model gas turbine. And then only when we have basically achieved this level of confidence of our model, we can think about performing simulation of real scale engine where we have a very limited amount of experimental data to validate our model. So let's say that the validation process starts here. And after that, we arrive to this level of, after that we have confidence our model works very good in different conditions, we can apply this to a very complex and also expensive simulation. Okay, so when we want to describe the evolution of the particle size distribution, we normally need to solve a population balance equation that you see here on this slide highlighted. You can see that the particle size distribution is a function of space and time, but also a function of another variable xi, which represent the particle properties, can be the diameter of the particle or the particle volume, or also the particle surface. The source term on the right-hand side of this equation represent the local thermophysical process which describe the particle evolution, meaning particle nucleation, coagulation, and eventually particle oxidation. Looking at the way this equation is written, normally if you consider, for example, that we are solving the equation in a finite volume concept, we normally have one value of the variable that we are solving for in the CFT grid, or in the CFT cell. In this case, we basically don't have a single value, but we have a distribution which looks, for example, like that. So we have on each cell, we have a distribution function of the particle properties that, as I was saying before, can be particle diameter or particle surface in each cell. So now this is quite complex and cannot be solved directly using the standard CFT solver that we use when we solve the Navier-Stokes equation. In our group, we have we use the method of moment, which basically apply a transformation of the population balance equation for the moment. So we have this equation that depends, as I was saying, from space-time and the vector xi of the internal coordinate of the particle properties. If we apply the definition of the moment, which is here the integral of the internal coordinate, the different component of the internal coordinate to the power of the moment multiplied by the particle density, what you can see is that basically we obtain a moment equation that depends only on space and time. This equation can be solved without any problem on any CFD code, in any CFD code, because it depends only on space and time. Obviously, this is this transformation doesn't come for free. We still need a closure for the source term, and to close which obviously, if you see here, depends on the particle distribution. We need to apply a closure model, and in this case, we are using the quadrature-based method of moment. In the literature, there have been different type of closure for the method of moment. You see here in the reference also, we have the standard quadrature method of moment, the extended quadrature method of moment, and in my group in Darmstadt, the split-based extended quadrature method of moment has been developed by Salenbach and co-author in 2019, and we have applied this to a series of simulation, a series of test cases that I'm going to show in the next slide. So The split-based EQMOM basically approximate the number density function of the particle. So the one that you see here in this plot, which is in red, so the unknown number density function by a weighted sum of sub-number density function that you see here. That, for example, in this case, we approximate with two sub-number density function, the one in green and the one in purple. This method allows us basically to have a point-wise number density function information, which is important when we when we want to treat accurately also the particle oxidation, and allow us for numerical robustness, because each we basically transport independently each sub-number density function, which are then coupled together through the coagulation term. And you can basically see here that each sub-number density function is solved by transporting only the first three order moment of the distribution. And this allows us to solve only for low order moment and to achieve numerical robustness that we need when we want to calculate very complex and very complex and accurate type of simulation. Okay, so this is the description of the model, and now I'm going to show you, if you remember this research approach from simple to complex, I'm going to show some example of the application of this approach, of this split-based extended method of moment at different type of flames. Obviously not everything what we have done, but just some example to show you how basically our approach has been developed in the years. So in this simulation of a counterflow diffusion flame, we have investigated the influence of strain rate and fuel dilution. This was an activity that's been done inside as a part of the European project estimate. And as I was saying, this is a work that we have done at the STFS in Darmstadt. So basically, the flame that you see here are ethylene air counterflow flame, and the fuel here is diluted with nitrogen with a different, you can see here the different mass fraction of the ethylene, which is one of the components which is normally used as the simplest component that can be used to describe hydrocarbon fuels that are used in engine. Is a component is a very simple surrogate for kerosene or also for diesel engine, for example, type of fuel. And then you can see here we have varied the mass fraction of ethylene, and also we change the strain rate of this counterflow flame. Then you can see here the variation of the effect of variation of strain. You can see here a three flame calculated with strain rate 50, 60, and 70. And you can basically see that when we increase the strain rate, the soot volume fraction produces decreases. And also you can see in the line represent our simulation, while the symbols represent the experimental data which have been performed, the experimental measurement which have been performed at KIT in Karlsruhe. So if we now look at the variation of fuel dilution, so of the effect, what you see here is that when we increase the amount of ethylene in the fuel, so when we reduce basically the dilution, what's happening is that the soot volume fraction profile increases. After that, we have analyzed this data. We have basically investigated what is happening in terms of soot formation and the different type of process happening on the soot particles. So for this, we have analyzed the different source term, and you can see here the inception, condensation, and AGA steps, and AGA source term for the different strain rate. And what we can basically see is that even though the soot volume fraction was different, so we have seen that it decreases while the strain rate is increasing, here we can see that the soot source then basically have a very small influence on this. So basically this tells us that the fact that the soot volume fraction is reduced is due to a smaller residence time of the particle due to the increase of strain rate. If we now compare the variation what happened is basically at the source stem when we varied the fuel dilution. So again, we are going here to increase the amount of ethylene in the fuel side. What happened is that instead we see a significant difference of the source stem for the different flame. So basically in this case, we see a visible reduction of the inception process and also of basically all the other phenomena, so condensation and also AGA, which is responsible for the source, for the soot surface growth. So basically, this tells us that even in a very simple laminar flame configuration, we have different mode of actions, and we have, and that our model is also able to quite well to reproduce this phenomena also when we compare with experimental data. So after this step, we have looked at some more complex flame, and we move basically to the simulation of turbulent flames. For this case, we have chosen one of the target case of the International Soot in Flame workshop, as I was mentioning before. So this is a natural gas diffusion flame where we have a fuel containing methane and also methane and nitrogen. You can see here the experimental the experimental data regarding the instantaneous LII. And also the time average LII. What you see here is that due to the property of the fuel, so we are talking about a methane flame, basically we have a very low sooting propensity and also high intermittency, which means that basically also in the experiment, so these results here has been generated averaging for a longer time, and also in our simulation we had to average for quite long time to get significant statistics. Good. So for this type of flame, we have applied a different type of modeling approach for the gas phase. So we've used a tabulation strategy. So we have created flamelet using a counterflow diffusion flame configuration. And we have saved in our table the entire thermochemical state. We've applied a beta PDF integration and created a database that can be accessed using a reduced order a reduced number of variables, not the entire thermochemical state, but only 3 variables, which are the mixture fraction variance, and the progress and a progress variable. This table is then coupled with our OpenFOAM framework, and we could calculate in CFD, in our CFD solver, this flame considering only 3 control variables, and access this table. For the coupling between the gas and the solid phase, an additional transport equation has been solved, considering a lumped pH species, which is then coupled with the soot model. So basically, this source term or sink term basically consider the transformation of the transition of the carbon atoms or of the pH from the gas phase to the solid phase. And you can see here the results. These are instantaneous, so it's a video of the evolution of the temperature, of the pH, and particle number density, and the soot volume fraction. And you can basically see that we achieve a quite good correlation between the pH and the soot volume fraction. So meaning that the model is working as expected. And after that, we have obviously validated with experimental data, as you can see here in this slide. So what you see here is the soot volume fraction extracted, the time average, the soot volume fraction extracted on the center line, where we also have some experimental data. What you see here is that the peak value and the peak position are, so the peak value is a little bit over-predicted, and the peak position is a bit upstream than what is expected in the experiment. But overall, we can consider these are quite satisfying results compared also with other published results from other authors that use also different approaches. What you also see here is the contour of the soot volume fraction, where you can basically see that, the white line represents here the stoichiometric Kito line. What you basically can see that in average, we observe that there is some soot particle in the lean region of the flame, so in this part here. But if you look at the instantaneous data, you will see that basically we don't have any soot in the lean part of the flame. So this is a very interesting aspect of this flame that we have analyzed more in detail also in the paper. So our approach that I was mentioning before, this SEQMOM model, allow us to reconstruct the particle size distribution, which is one of the important, also an important characteristic to analyze when we move from standard type of fuel towards something sustainable fuel. So what we want to minimize is also the particle dimension in the fuel. Therefore, we need methods that allow us to characterize also the particle size distribution. So what you see here is a contour of the particle number density. Again, the white line represents the stoichiometric line. And on the right part of the slide, you basically see the mean reconstructed particle size distribution along the center line. Let me guide through this. So what we basically see is that we have a unimodal distribution when we are here on the first point, here around 50. X over d is the axial position over the diameter of the flame. And when we move more downstream, the particle size distribution became bimodal, as we expect in any shooting flame. What we can observe is that the diameter of the maximum diameter of this flame, maximum particle diameter of this flame is quite small, and this is also consistent to the fact that we are burning methane as a fuel and not a more complex hydrocarbon. When we move to the so downstream, the stoichiometric point, so basically the stoichiometric isoline, what you see here, 125 X over d, we see that the particle oxidation reduce further the particle diameter, and we basically move to basically zero particle, to very small particle downstream the flame. Unfortunately, we don't have results from the experiment for the particle size distribution, but what we could observe is that we obtain a result in agreement with some recent publications which are also using a sectional method, which is another approach that delivers the particle size distribution in a continuous form. After that, this analysis on turbulent flame, we have performed some further investigation on a more complex case, which is a full-scale aero-engine combustor, the BR710 combustor from Rolls-Royce. This is another activity that has been done at during this estimate project in STFS in Darmstadt. So we have used in this case a different solver, which is basically in the collaboration that Darmstadt has with Rolls-Royce, and we can basically see here the grid that we have used, which is quite refined in the rich region. This is a rich quench-lean combustor, aero-engine combustor, and we have performed large simulation at 4 different operating conditions, which correspond also to different thrust level and different than fuel mass flow, which obviously lead us to different type of emission during the flight mission. Let me show you some results. So this is a video about with the temperature. So you can basically see that we have high temperature in the rich region. Then we have the temperature is reduced, and also the soot volume fraction that you see here is reduced to the secondary air injection, and in the quench zone. And then the last part is the lean region of the combustion chamber. We can see here the time average and also the instantaneous soot volume fraction at the different operating points. So going from the maximum of the mass flow, of the fuel mass flow at takeoff, to the most linear case, which is the idle case. And you can basically see that we have a significant variation from the most rich case, which is a takeoff, so 100% of the power, to the 7% of idle. So there is a significant variation on the soot volume fraction. What we also observe is that in the quench region, we only have very small soot pockets that are remaining, and then we basically see that there are only few amount of soot volume fraction that remains not oxidized in the lean region. In order to better characterize these results, we have tested, or we have compare this with experimental data. So you see here also the different conditions we have compared, and we have experimental data from the ICAO database. As I was saying before, in this very for this very big or real scale combustor, we only have a few experimental data. And in particular here, you can see that the emission index of the soot particle is 1 point averaged on the outlet of the combustor. So you basically, we don't have any possibility, let's say, to tune our, or to validate our model to understand if something goes wrong, where is the weak part of our model. So therefore, we need basically all the validation that I showed you before. Also, what you can see here is basically that we obtain an overall good agreement of the experimental data. We only have a little bit of under prediction at takeoff condition. Exploiting the possibility that, so the results that we have with our detailed soot model, we could analyze the particle size distribution in the combustion chamber, and in particular at the 4 operating conditions in different regions of the combustion chamber. So we have analyzed at in the rich part, in the quenching part, and also downstream in the lean part. What you see here is that in the rich part, as we expect, we have a bimodal distribution at the maximum power, so at takeoff, and then you can basically see that at idle, which is the leanest case, we basically obtain only a unimodal distribution. Then we observe that the particle number is slightly reduced in the quenching zone due to particle oxidation, but still we see a bimodal shape, while in the lean region, we can basically see that we have a significant reduction of all the particle size and also of the particle density, and also of the particle size due to oxidation. And what you can also understand is that we need some residence time in order to the complete oxidation to take place. Okay, so with that, I would like to move to an example of sustainable fuels. So all what we have showed has been done considering the standard hydrocarbon fuels. When we move towards sustainable fuel, the entire chain I've showed needs to be basically redone in order to evaluate what if we have a proper model, and if we then are able to evaluate the same turbulent lab scale flame and also the more complex case with sustainable fuel. So in the example I'm showing, this is only an example to show how the particle size and distribution change when we use sustainable fuel. This is an example of oxymethylators, which are fuel studied for substitute diesel engine. So what you can see here is that different type of fuel, different class of fuels, alcohol, ethers, and biodiesel. And in our study, we have analyzed oxymethylators, which are called PODE or OMEs. They have, as you can see, a high Zeton number and also high oxygen content. Therefore, are selected as a substitute for diesel fuel. They have no carbon-carbon bond, and therefore are allow us to have, when burned, a significant soot reduction. They are not toxic, and they can mix very well with with diesel fuel, for example, in blends. Then we have also, they are not corrosive, so they have good material compatibility, and therefore they have been studied and they have been selected as blending for diesel fuel. In particular, there are different type of molecule. We have focused our attention between OME3 and 5. And this, as you can see here from this graph, they have a suitable Zeton number and also a suitable boiling point for self-ignition engine. These are the chemical formula. So the OMEs have basically this CH2O group, which can be replicated many times. So you can see here that the form of the molecule changes. If we have OME3, we have 3 of this group, and so on. So 4 and 5 in this case that you see here. So what the research on sustainable fuel has been has been done like that. So there have been tests at engine scale that show that blending OMEs with diesel or burning OME pure lead to a significant soot reduction, but there was not clear why. So in order to efficiently use the sustainable fuel that, just to remember you, is not available in large amount, we need to answer as a research several questions. First of all, what is the mechanism of soot reduction? Then what is is a soot suppression effect, or there is a dilution effect when we blend these fuels? And then which of these OME, since we have different type of molecule available, which is the OME that is most suitable to be blended, and also which is the blending ratio, and obviously many other questions. So we have done this in a collaboration with the University of Naples Federico II, with Professor Marino Sirignano, and he provided us experimental data of laminar premix partner configurations, the one you can see here. They've done leaf measurements, so laser-induced fluorescence, and also LII, and we have done the corresponding numerical simulation of this. We have a reference flame, which is pure ethylene premix flame, and then we have doped this flame with 20% of ethylene, with 20% of OME 2, 3, and 4, to evaluate what is basically the effect of this. Consider that when we perform this kind of experiment, also the boundary condition is to be selected properly in order to be sure that we are looking at the exact effect. So basically, we have kept the carbon flux constant in order to really look at what is happening in terms of soot formation. So let me show you some results. Here we have the results of the leaf and the LII for two equivalence ratio, slightly rich and richer. So 2.16 equivalence ratio and 2.46. What you see here are the curves with pure OME in dark and pure ethylene, sorry, in dark blue, and light blue, the blended flames. The leaf, so the fluorescence experimental data correspond to the smaller particles which are formed, so that we call here nanoparticles. And what we basically observe here is that for both equivalence ratio, the small particles are not very much changed, while if we look at the larger particle, which are the experimental data of the LII, compared also with our numerical simulation, we basically see that there is instead, for high equivalence ratio, a significant change between the ethylene pure flame and the OME blended flame. So this is an interesting effect. So we basically, what we are basically observing is that the OME blending, so the blending with sustainable fuel, is reducing the dimension of the particle, but the small nanoparticles are remaining almost untouched. And this is obviously quite important, because the smallest particles are also the most difficult to filter, to be filtered in a car, for example, or in a heavy truck, heavy duty trucks, for example. So what we also observe is that our numerical model is also able to capture this, these differences between the nanoparticle and the large particle formation. We observe that our model is not able to characterize the same reduction of soot volume fraction similarly to the experiment. And so this is something that it remained open in this work, and is probably due to the fact that for this kind of fuel, also the kinetic mechanism is not was not at that time completely comprehensive. If we look at the particle size distribution, we observe basically the same thing, or the same effect that I was mentioning. So again, this is a particle size distribution with the B-model. You see here an example of this B-model distribution. The first mode represents the small particle, while the second mode represents the aggregate, so the bigger soot particle. And here you see in black the pure ethylene flame, and in blue you see the OME3 blended flame. What we observe is basically that you see here only the experimental results. You see that for the lean flame, the OME3 blended flame show only a unimodal distribution, while ethylene showed a bimodal distribution. When we move to the looking at the experiment of the richer case, what you observe here is that the dimension of the particle is also, when we blend with OME, significantly reduced. Regarding the nanoparticle, so the first mode, you see in both cases that there is not a big change. So again, we observed the same thing in the experiment, and we were able, with the numerical simulation, to observe the same thing. Here you see a summary of the results. So we observed that the small particles are substantially unchanged, while we have a significant reduction of larger soot particle due to the blending with an oxygenated fuel, and also that our simulation are able to capture this trend. Finally, I would like to show an example, results on the different OME types. So we have compared the ethylene flame, which is in black, with the three type of OME, OME 2, 3, and 4, so the different molecule dimension. And this is also quite interesting comparison. You already see from the experiment, if you look at the points, that you don't see any big change in the different blending in both cases, basically in a low sooting flame and a highly sooting flame. Again, here you see that when we blend, independent of the type of molecule, when we blend sustainable fuel, we obtain smaller particle for the aggregate, but we obtain a similar amount of small particle. And between the OMEs, the difference is very small. Okay, so this was an example of sustainable fuels. And now I would like to go a little bit more on the perspective and discuss how we can reduce the emission in aviation. To do that, I would like to show you some data about this paper of Lee and co-author, which is quite interesting. So they basically analyzed the effective radiative forcing of different emission in aviation. So looking at so you see here listed the different type of emission, and if you look at the first line, we basically see here in red a warming effect. So here, oops, sorry. So you see basically here in blue a cooling effect of the emission, and in red a warming effect of the emission. And here the first line represents the contrail cirrus effect, which is a quite significant radiative forcing. You see also on the second line the carbon dioxide. But not going in detail about the entire table, I would like just to show you, put your attention on the last two line of this column. So basically the net aviation of the non-CO2 term is higher than the CO2 emission that you see here. So this is the complete aviation, net aviation radiative forcing effect, and this is due to the non-CO2 impact. This means that currently the effect of CO2 emission is not that strong compared to what we obtain with soot particle due to the contrail cirrus. So let me explain more in detail. So the white stripes that you see behind the airplane, always when you look at from the ground, are formed basically from water vapor coming out of the engine and the soot particle. These are defined as, these are called contrails, and are basically due to the fact that when we emit different products, as we were saying before. Soot particle and water vapor are two of them. Due to the temperature outside the engines, when they are injected in the atmosphere at very high altitudes, this can condensate, and the soot particle represent the nucleus for, can act as a nucleus for the water to condensate and become ice. And then this can create artificial clouds, which are called contrails. These obviously can reflect, these additional clouds can reflect the incoming sun rays, but and therefore basically have a cooling effect. But on the other hand, they can reflect the thermal radiation from the Earth, and therefore they have a negative radiative forcing, so a warming effect on the planet. They basically act as a blanket on the Earth. So when we, so this is basically what is happening. And now the thing is how we can use it, how we can decarbonize, how we can make aviation sustainable. So there are different, so that the answer is obvious, not one answer. We have different type of flight mission, so different type of aircraft. We have very short range, medium range, and long range, and in all of these sections, all of these sectors, we basically can have different type of strategies. For example, electric flights is something that is very much researched today, and is something that is already reality for very small aircraft, like for helicopter. For bigger plane, it's something that is still under investigation. So let me show you the different type of strategy that are currently investigated to minimize the climate impact of aviation. There are something which is related to technological advancement, which means basically improving the performance of the aircraft today, so we can maximize the performance of combustor. This is already happening basically in the last 40 years. So we can minimize pollutant emission, improving the combustion efficiency. And there are other strategies related, for example, to the aerodynamic of the aircraft and also improving air traffic management. This is related to the technological advancement. And there is also a change of the primary energy sources, which you can see here in this timeline is basically already happening, or is already the research for this for what is going to happen in 2040 and later is already been done today. So currently we have airplane flying with kerosene, and we are already studying, as we have seen, alternative fuels, which can be of synthetic origin or biofuel. And then we are already investigating as well airplane with liquid nitrogen, liquid hydrogen or liquid natural gas. And then we're also thinking about electric aviation and also hybrid system. So the revolution in aviation propulsion means that we have to abandon completely fossil fuel in the near future. In the short term, what we can do is to use drop-in fuel, which today are applied with a small share because they are only available only in a small share. Midterm and long term, we're going to use non-carbon fuel, like for example hydrogen. And then in the long term, we already see that there is a lot of research in electrification and new concept of engine and entire airplane that will probably be available in the long term. In Braunschweig, we are working on this in the Excellence Cluster Sustainable and Efficient Aviations. Today I talk about some of the research that will be also continued in this excellence cluster, in particular in the drop-in fuel as well as in hydrogen combustion, but there are a lot of colleagues working on the electrification and also improvement of the aerodynamic of the aircraft for the future. The forecast in sustainable aviation, as you can see here, this is the net CO2 emission measured basically with data from 2005 until until today. Basically, this is a report of 2022 from the EASA. So what you see here is that the emission of aviation dropped significantly during COVID. And then you see that now we are basically here, so there is a recovery of the sector. And what you see here is the different type of scenario, what happens to the CO2 emission if we apply different type of strategy. I don't want to go in detail of this. I just want to show you the effect of sustainable aviation fuel, so-called SAF, on the emission, on the CO2 emission. So the net CO2 emission can be halved if we are going to use SAF. The major challenge today is that these are not available in a huge amount, and the price of the available SAF is also very high. Yeah, again, this needs to be done from simple to complex, and I'll show you two examples of experimental data available today on there are many around, but these are two one I selected. What the experiment say us is that when we use sustainable aviation fuel that are also different types, so you see here, this is JP5 and Jet A are the standard that's used today, and then you see different type of sustainable aviation fuel. You see that the peak of the soot volume fraction is reduced when we use sustainable aviation fuel. These are data of a counterflow flame. So the first, basically, the first step of the analysis I've showed you before. On the other hand, on the left, on the right of the slide, I have instead brought some results of a very complex experiment. So these are basically two airplanes flying one behind each other. So the first aircraft is burns SAF, sustainable aviation fuel, or standard kerosene, and we have some measurements that have been done in the aircraft behind. So you can imagine how complex and how also expensive this experiment is. So what you see here is what is happening in terms of ice particle number. So the ice particle I said before coming that will probably form contrails versus the soot particle number per kilogram of fuel. You see here the Jet A1 standard kerosene, which is used today, and the different type of sustainable aviation fuel. So again, can you see here that there is a significant reduction of the soot particle number, as well as the ice particle which are formed behind, so in the wake of the airplane. So this is quite a good news. So this we already know that sustainable aviation fuel can support the decarbonization and can help us also in reducing the effect of aviation. There is a lot of work to do, and still, so these are some of my perspective. We have so SAF has the potential to be used basically today already in the engine that we have available to achieve carbon neutrality in the short term. They have a high potential to reduce the climate impact of aviation, and there is also legislation supporting the utilization of SAF up to 70% until 2050. There are some challenges that I mentioned a couple of times. So we need to upscale the production of SAF, increase the availability, and hope also for a reduction in price. And also in terms of the emission, what we have as additional challenge is that the different type of SAF produced in different places from different feedstock may have also different sooting behavior. So it's difficult to generalize the results for every kind of airplane and every kind of type of fuel. What do we still need to achieve sustainable aviation in terms of related to SAF is to understanding the sooting behavior of different type of SAF through target experiment and simulation. So again, a strong collaboration between experimentalists and numerical people, researchers is very important. We need to evaluate not only the CO2 emissions, that we have seen that CO2 is obviously reduced because it's carbon neutral fuel, but the non-CO2 emissions are important, and this needs to be done also at real condition, so at aero engine operating conditions, so high pressure and also high temperature. And we need to also then select the proper sustainable aviation fuel so that we can minimize both CO2 and non-CO2 emission. And another challenge or future direction could be to build tailor-made sustainable aviation fuel mixture that can reduce both the large particle as well as the ultrafine particle. I haven't discussed about the ultrafine particle too much, but if you think that airplane produce most of the soot at takeoff, if the ultrafine particle are not changed when the airplane take off close to the airport, we will have still a lot of pollutant for the local air quality. So this is an aspect that should be mentioned. With that, the conclusion. So I think that achieving carbon neutrality is a huge but a feasible societal challenge that we have. We have at the moment diverse technological solutions that have a different level of maturity. So we need to continue working on that. And we need to optimize also the resources that we have available, so the sustainable aviation fuel in this case, or sustainable fuel in general, to understand which energy sources we can use, when we can optimally use this, and how we can optimally use that. Obviously, in the disciplinary strategy and also the assessment of all this strategy is important. And with that, I like to acknowledge all the people that supported me and worked with me in the last years. So my colleague in Braunschweig and all my colleagues, and also Professor Christian at Darmstadt, and all the collaborators that I have in this year. I thank the support of the Excellence Cluster C here in Braunschweig, and also thank you for your attention, and I'm happy to answer to your questions.
Thank you very much, Federica. I mean, I really enjoyed the talk. So there is time for questions. Let's see if there is anyone with raised hand. Maybe in the meantime, while people think about the question, and by the way, you can write your question in the chat and I will read it. I had the first curiosity. I mean, you have shown several simulations with a number of molecules and mechanisms. So I was wondering if you anticipate any major uncertainty or issue in predicting, for instance, soot formation from new fuels for which we don't have exactly the tailored mechanisms, and if you anticipate the need of redeveloping or improving or optimizing the mechanisms.
Yeah, so definitely this is a good point that I not only briefly mentioned. I mean, we need the detailed mechanism, I said, but it's absolutely fundamental that we have, we probably won't have a mechanism for each type of sustainable fuels that we have. So what we need is instead some surrogates, which are already been implemented in some groups. So, but we need obviously some automatic approach that can develop surrogate starting from real fuels. So from real fuels, this I think is important. So when we have the surrogate, when we identify the surrogate with component where we already have a kinetic mechanism, then we are, let's say, fine. If there are components where we don't have the mechanism, then we basically only can do experiments because we are not able, obviously, to do simulation with that. So I think that the concept that the surrogate for this very complex fuel is something that where there is a potential for the colleagues developing mechanism to work in the next years.
Indeed. Yeah, it's a very good point. I don't know if in the meantime there is any question. You can unmute yourself. Yes, so there is a question from Sandra. So on slide 25, why in your flamelet tabulation approach you do not solve also the variance of the progress variables, and why do you not consider, I think, the heat losses? That's the question.
Yeah. So let me see if I can. Oops. Let me move to the slide. So basically in the flame we have. Okay, so in this kind of in this flame, let me put again. We haven't considered the progress variable, so the variance of the progress variable and also the heat transfer. Actually, there is no wall here because this is an open, is a lab scale ambient pressure open flame. So that's why we haven't considered the heat losses to the wall. And we have seen that the radiation also in this case has the gas phase radiation has a small effect. That's why we haven't considered that. And the progress variable, when we select the variance of the progress variable, the thing is like that when we select the complexity of the model, we start always simple to complex. So we have tested with three variables, mixture fraction, variance of mixture fraction, progress variable. We've seen that we got good results, and then we basically continue with this methodology. I know that there are depending on the different type of configuration, you may need more variables. So this is not excluded. I mean, it's also not excluded that we may improve our result. Also, we haven't tested that, so it could be that if we use more complex model, you could improve a little bit. But as I said, there are for this flame, the other type of modeling approach that have been used, more complex than what we have used, also show very similar results in terms of gas phase and soot phase. So I haven't showed the gas phase, but you basically see that for the gas phase, we are maybe I have in the. Let me see if I have in the. So basically, when we look at the. Oh no, unfortunately, I don't have. Yeah, no, I don't have. But no. But if you look at the paper, the gas phase is is overlapping basically on the results on the experimental result, and then we just stop to complicate the model further.
Thanks. I don't know if there are other questions. I don't see them in the chat. Okay, I think we can. I would like to thank you again, Federica, for this very nice talk. Maybe just a last, not a question, but it's a bit provocative. So in the beginning, you showed that among the different emissions, CO2, but do we really consider CO2 as a pollutant?
Yeah, I mean, so when we use hydrocarbons, obviously we will produce always the CO2. When this is in the atmosphere, is also, yeah. So it's something that it is in nature, even without the combustion of human activity. So it is a greenhouse gas, and I think that what we should try to do is to reduce or to try to achieve really a CO2 balance, so that we don't. Yeah. So to be able to stop the climate change, that's basically it. Obviously, it's something that is in nature and is part of our life cycle, I would say.
No, but I mean, I was more wondering to the fact that, of course, as you say, I mean, any complete combustion process would actually, with the carbonaceous fuel, would actually release CO2. So I don't know if we can really qualify it as a pollutant, but I mean,
yeah. Is it something that we cannot get rid if we improve, let's say, the efficiency to 100%? That's true. Yeah, we cannot, but yeah, we will always produce CO2 when we burn any hydrocarbons. So,
okay, I think we can close it here. Thank you again. Thanks a lot for the presentation, and thank you everyone for being connected.
Thank you.
Meet for the next event. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye bye.